Hey viewers, today we'll be looking at the Rimac Concept One in Asphalt 9. We've already seen the max out so many times, so we might as well just get into the races anyway. So I tried this in the recent I think it was called Electric Season. That's literally what this season was called, Electric Season 1. Basically, you got to try this and many other cars that were using the Rimac Concept 1's event, including the Inferno for whatever reason, despite being a car and if you know how to drive it. Now, this Rimac Concept One is a high-end class A car, possibly a king contender if you know how to drive it, although it was relatively difficult to start up to max, or golden max, as it was possible to have it at golden max, as I think it gave out enough epics to, but the thing is, it is a very grounded car, so you have to drive it very specifically. As you can see throughout most of this video, the car does not drift all the way, as you can probably tell, as it doesn't feel like drifting all the way, probably because it's frontward grounded. You might not know what this term is if you don't watch my videos. Basically, what I describe the car's groundedness or floatiness by is if it's rearward grounded, frontward grounded, or floaty. And there are many different versions of floaty, as I like to put out. This car is very frontward grounded, which ends up with the handling just being very poor when you're doing things like drifting or turning with nitro. With this car, I think the nitro pushes the front further down, so even with shockwave, it will turn very poorly. Although not as bad as the Elise or the IDR. The IDR still is one, if not the most frontward grounded car in the game, I think. That or rearward grounded, but it looks more like frontward grounded. Anyway, this car has a positive acceleration modifier. If you don't know what an acceleration modifier is, it's basically what's the difference between the actual stat of the car and what the game says. So this car has around an 86, but in reality, it's around an 88, which is a +2 modifier. Because it can keep up with cars like the Spark Owl. It's a little bit slower than the Concept. It's a little bit faster than the Concept 2 actually, but the video I was comparing was before they buffed the Concept 2, so I was not completely sure if it's faster than it now. And it's a little bit slower than the Batista, which is a 3.31 second car. This is a 3.39 second car. This was conducted in a test at 200 kilometers an hour, which is the standard test for most cars in Asphalt 9, which is about 112 miles an hour, although it's not really reliable in miles an hour, as it's about 1.6 kilometers in 1 mile, so you can go up to 201 and not realize it, and that could be a detriment, as frames are much faster than you think. Anyway, there's another funny detail that I just found out about this car is how humongous it is. In real life, it's not that big of a car, but in game, you can probably tell by how big the tires are. This is a very overscale car. Like, even compared to the Inferno, which is a relatively tiny car, this car is absolutely massive compared to most other cars around it. And another thing I want to talk about, the models. It feels like they attempted to debadge this model in a way, like how on the rear, it was supposed to say Concept 1 in very legible chrome text, I'd say. It's engraved, it's not really engraved, it's badged onto the rear of the car. And in front, the Rimac badge, the badge should be very white, and I'm not exactly sure if it should be glowing, I don't think it is, but in this game, it's very grayed out. It's almost as if they don't want you to know that's a Rimac if you don't look closely. That is kind of a little concerning, I'd say, as if you're a game dev and you debadge cars, you can get some serious trouble for doing that, and I'm not sure if Gameloft would be doing anything about it, or if this is just intentional, as these models were provided to them by the manufacturers themselves, if you did not know, as Gameloft doesn't really model the cars anymore. This was revealed in the absolute disaster that the previous games were, more specifically GT Racing 2, which I'll show right here. Basically, the Monster Freeride is the absolute worst offense that they've done, but the car models were generally worse in the few years that they did the modeling at the end, the tail end, and I'm very sorry about the whole frame rate here. There's nothing I can do about it. The game optimization just fell suddenly into its update, especially if it needs synchronization. Okay, here we were having a tough battle. We were having a tough battle with this Rimac Concept One, but also look here. So unfortunately, I did knock him down. I didn't really try to, but I did at least guarantee the win. Now that traffic car, we did somehow graze without losing speed. I think that was really funny, as most of the time, if you're on manual acceleration, if you hit a traffic car, you'll just get stopped. And back to what I was talking about how with Game Loss Mountain. They gave up for a good reason, and that leads me into the Batista, which the Batista is currently the only car in the game to have a model update. And I'd say this leads further into my next point, which is the Batista's rerun. Since Game Loft only receives models directly from the manufacturers, and in licensing terms you have to contact them anyway to update the model, this does reveal that Game Loft has reacquired the license for the Batista. So that means we should be expecting a Batista rerun sometime soon. Now, some upcoming events to think about, along with some other people in other Discords I'm in, is the Two Ataris rerun. Now, we're not exactly sure if this is a proper rerun. We are not sure if it's a Grand Prix or event rerun. And we also have PS4, which is guaranteed at Christmas because they do United States syndicates every year. And current events, I'd like to talk about the current events actually. We're having car hunts for the Draco GTE, which is, I've done I think 30 races in it, I've only got 2 drops out of it, so this is going to be very, very painful. A very painful one. Which is unfortunate because I really like the GTE. Like, not the design, it's very strangely designed, I'm not the biggest fan. But it is a floaty car, and it's the only other floaty car in Class B, which I think is really interesting, as there aren't a lot of floaty cars below Class A. I guess for good reason, they're not really fast enough to be floaties. We also have the Toroidian 1 megawatts SD, which recently came out, and the Razor Tachyon multiplayer season, which you can test out. Unfortunately, it was not as floaty as I expected it to be. The rebound stiffness showed me that it would be floaty, but instead it just turns out it has some immense body roll. And we also have the LEGO Technic Senna GTR Grand Prix, which unfortunately you won't win the car in. I think it's just a limited run. And here, this is what I meant by the car's roundedness. If you're on an incline, it just at full radius, you're just not in the floor anymore, as you can see here. It's a very interesting effect. I think it reminds me of World Class or Asphalt 8 cars, as when you punch, it actually sharpens the drift radius. Anyway, back when I was talking about, we had the LEGO Senna GTR's Grand Prix, which only gives you McLaren blueprints, because it's a limited run car. And anyway, now when you compare this car to its, say, its descendant, the Rimac Concept 2, which has been named in real life the Rimac Nevera, which interestingly enough it means refrigerator in Spanish. We could just get aside from that. Anyway, the Rimac Concept 2, well, yeah, the Rimac Concept 2, people say it does have faster acceleration now that they removed the acceleration delay on it, although in the video I've tested, this thing accelerates a little bit faster. Sprint 60 for 112 just because it does not have that big of a delay. The Rimac Concept 2 is more floaty, obviously, in every way possible because it's just not grounded like this. And it is way faster for obvious reasons. It's a Class S car, very high end by the way. This thing has much worse stats overall, apart from handling. I think the Concept 2 has better the Concept 2 has worse handling. But you can't really compare them to each other, as it doesn't really work across classes, especially from a difference this big. You can't be comparing a 238 car to a car that goes like 270. Anyway, as we move on to our last race, which is a pretty calm race to be completely honest. There's not much competition in this. I just drive locally. I'd just like to give you my thoughts about this car. It's a really high-end Class A car, possibly king if you know how to drive it right, although the Imola is just better in every way. Apart from acceleration, this thing it's very similar to the Valhalla in general stats, although I am disappointed by the fact that it's 238 miles an hour, which we see a lot of the cars that go at that speed. The Nitro is particularly poor, not as bad as like the Tryon, although it's still usable. Very grounded, as you can probably tell throughout the entire video on what I'm talking about. The handling is very good, especially if you get the full drift radius. It's very, very sharp. The acceleration is exceptionally good, top 5 at least. And I genuinely like the Concept One. I'm kind of disappointed the fact I'm not able to win it, although that's completely fine as given the direction this game is going in. I would have liked to see the Concept S. Anyway, as we come near the end of this finish line, I'd like to thank you for watching. Maybe leave a like, comment, subscribe, or join my Discord as the car eats the wall. And I hope to see you in my next one. Goodbye.